Every now and then, the lights would blink out, but as quickly as my brain could process the loss, snowflakes that were lining up to block my view would shift and open, and the lights would be visible again. And then, briefly, there was a flash of red light. A few of us saw it, including Gozzle. Was that a siren, or what do you call them? A flasher? Like for the police? Said Krista. I think those are blues, said Jason. Well, a fire truck then. That's no fire truck, I said. It wasn't that big. It could be something, said Gozzle. Even a volunteer fireman might have a two-way radio, something we could use. Use for what, I thought. Who do you call on a two-way radio? The police? The fire department? People like that. Emergency people. Rescue people. That's what I understand what Gozzle was that's what I understood what Gozzle was thinking. Just how bad he thought this was. It was jarring, like running blind into a moving screen on the basketball court. I'm going out there, he said. It seemed like a bad idea, just way too dangerous. It probably wasn't more than 10 degrees out there. You could feel the cold right through the safety glass. That stuff was thick and insulated, but the cold still nipped out at me every time I pressed my face, or even a fingertip to the glass. So yeah, 10 degrees tops and dark, with snow falling heavily and drifting into small mountains on the ground. Going out into all that seemed like a lot of risk for a pretty shaky reward. He was taking one for the team, I'll give him that. I felt a little flicker of gratitude, but mostly I just had a bad feeling about it. We walked back down the hall and picked up his coat. It was a big gray parka, a lot like Holloway's. I wondered if they issued them to all the teachers at the start of winter like gym equipment, or if both men had just reached the point where they no longer cared what their little jackets looked like and had just gone for the warmest thing they could find. I knew they had big and tall stores in the city, so maybe they had cold and old ones too. He put his hood up and then zipped the jacket all the way until he was peering out through a little tunnel of fake fur. He stomped into his big boots and buckled them up tight. His dress shoes were probably tucked away in the closet of his room, along with the old maps and broken globes and class projects from like 1990. We followed him like a line of ducklings as he headed down the hall. He grabbed the handle of the double doors on the right and rammed his shoulder into the metal frame. It barely budged. He pulled back, creating a little space, and rammed his shoulder in again. It was moving now, and he began kicking the bottom of the frame in between his little bull rushes. He was swearing under his breath the whole time, but he was making progress. The door opened onto a covered concrete patio, which was the only reason the door could be opened at all. But the snow had blown across the concrete, where kids would stand waiting for the late buses in the nice weather. It had started to drift against the wall where they'd lean, and if they were feeling brave, smoke. So the snow was maybe a foot deep against the door. Beyond that, At the edge of the concrete, there was a 4-foot wall of white. It glowed dimly in the light streaming through the glass double doors. One more kick, and the door opened wide enough for him to slide through. Gosling paused and blink and you missed it, crossed himself. Spectacles, testicles, wallet, and watch. Then he shouldered his way through. The wind slammed the door shut behind him, spraying a little fan of snow across the hallway. Pete, Jason, Julie, Krista, and I stood by the doors as Gosling Pete, Jason, Julie, Krista, and I stood by the doors as Gosling made his way across the concrete. What a funny name that is, Gosling. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but anyway. We watched as he clambered up the wall of snow. He was kind of nimble for an old guy. Like I said, he was an assistant football coach, so I'm sure he'd been a player back in the day. He reached the top and took a step forward. He took another and sank down up to his waist. I thought he might turn around, but he kept pushing forward into the dark and the snow. He took a few more forced steps, his feet moving unseen under the snow, and his upper body leaning forward into it. And then we lost sight of him. You really think it was a flasher or something like that, said Krista as we turned to our spots against the wall. I think she was talking to Pete, but he was heading off toward the men's room at the end of the hall, so I took the opportunity to answer. I guess it could be, I said, but why would it go off and on like that? I don't know, I said, and that was the end of my latest attempt at conversation with Krista. It was quiet for a few seconds. Some of us took a seat and the others kept standing. My jacket was still warm from the hours I'd already spent sitting on it. Can you see him out there? Said Julie. I think I can, said Jason, his nose pressed against the cold glass. Over there, sort of in the middle of the lawn. See how there's movement? Oh yeah, she said. Maybe they just, brushed it with their hand, said Jason. Brushed what? Said Julie. The button, he said, for the flasher. Like they were reaching for the radio and hit the button for the siren flasher thing. Yeah, I said. I could see that, said Julie. Les let out some air, blowing a dismissive little riss through his teeth. When he spoke, you could hear the smugness in his voice. That's no flasher, no volunteer firefighter, he said. That's red light. That's that red light? It was a flare. For the road, only there is no road right now. That guy up there is as screwed as we are. More. It was quiet for a few seconds as we turned the idea over in our heads. Then Pete made a kapow sound and a hand gesture like he was shooting himself in the head. He knew Les was right. We all did. Why didn't you say something before Gosling went out there? Said Julie. Why should I? Said Les. It's his life. It was, and that was the problem. I don't think it was really Les's fault. I mean, I don't think any of us thought that people would actually die in the storm. We've been through lots of them, and I never happened to anyone, and it never happened to anyone we knew. We'd have to change that thinking, though. When we did, we'd all start to think the same thing, that maybe Les had killed a man. For now, we still had hope. We went back to staring into the darkness. Can anyone see him? Asked Krista. No one could. The headlights burned for a little while longer, and then they didn't. It had been a while since we'd first seen them, and it was tough to say whether they'd faded out over time or had gone out suddenly. It had seemed like they were just getting stronger for a while, but that was probably just because it was getting darker around them. They were gone now, in any case. We thought that was as bad as it could get, and then the power went out.